Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 774 of the Juicebox Podcast. On today's episode of the Juicebox Podcast, I'm speaking with the mother of a child who has type 1 diabetes, who recently became more anxious about type 1 than she was previously. Today we talked about it. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you have type 1 diabetes and are a U.S. resident or are the caregiver of someone with type 1, please go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Fill out the survey. When you complete the survey, you're supporting people with type 1 diabetes, you're supporting the podcast, and you might just be helping yourself. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. If you're looking for a community around diabetes, look no farther than the private Facebook group Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. It's free for all and has over 30,000 members. Ask questions, just lurk, do whatever makes you comfortable. Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by Touched by Type 1. And tickets are on sale right now at touchedbytype1.org for Touched by Type 1's Dancing for Diabetes annual show. The 22nd annual Dancing for Diabetes Showcase will take place on Saturday, November 5th at 7 p.m. at the Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts in Orlando, Florida. Check it out at touchedbytype1.org. Today's show is also sponsored by US Med. You can get your diabetes supplies at US Med, just like we do. To get your free benefits check, just call 888-721-1514 or go to usmed.com/juicebox. US Med accepts Medicare nationwide and over 800 private insurers. They always provide you with 90 days worth of supplies and fast and free shipping. They carry everything from insulin pumps and diabetes testing supplies to the latest CGMs like Freestyle Libre 3 and the Dexcom G6. Better service and better care is what you can expect from US Med, and they have plenty of practice, having served over 1 million diabetes customers since 1996. usmed.com/juicebox, the number one distributor for Freestyle Libre systems nationwide. They are the number one specialty distributor for Omnipod DASH, the number one fastest growing tandem distributor nationwide, and they are the number one rated distributor in Dexcom customer satisfaction surveys. Not only that, but that's where Arden gets her Omnipod and Dexcom supplies, from US Med. Links to US Med and Touched by Type 1 can be found in the audio app you're listening to right now, in the show notes of that app, or at juiceboxpodcast.com. When you use the links, you're supporting the show. usmed.com/juicebox. touchedbytype1.org.
My name is Jenny. I've got two sons, one age 10, one age 7. It's my 10-year-old that has type 1 diabetes. He was diagnosed when he was 2. So we've been doing this for a while now.
Wow. Okay. 8 years. And you're married?
Yep, I'm married.
Okay. And you said you're part of the Utah fan club?
Yeah. I know you got a lot of Utah fans, so we're definitely part of that.
I certainly do. I appreciate this, Utah, very much. And other states should do the same. I don't know how you guys get information around, but but I wish you would share it. I assume there's like a Mormon WhatsApp or something like that, or
we're not Mormon, but there might be. I don't know.
Oh, it's bled outside of the religion and into just regular Utah.
Yes,
oh,
yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to hire PR people. It's going to be 3 Mormon ladies, and I think that's going to do it for me because they're amazing at spreading information around. Anyway,
I know.
Well, that's so cool. You've been in Utah your whole life?
Yeah.
Nice. It's one of those places that when people try to get me to move somewhere, the pictures they send are astonishing.
Oh my gosh, Utah's so great. And when I was growing up, I wanted to get out. You know how it goes. It's like, oh, I want to get out. I want to go somewhere more liberal. And then as I grew up and, just started having kids and stuff, I'm like, I love this place. It's beautiful.
Well, I live in New Jersey. It is not beautiful.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's fine and all, but I noticed driving Arden to college as we went down the eastern seaboard. I was like, with the exception of how the kinds of trees change, you never know where you are. It all looks sort of the same, but every picture someone sent me of Utah, I'm like, oh, that looks like Utah. So pretty cool. All right. So you've, let's see, your kid's 10, had diabetes for 8 years. You have a second child who's 7. Is there any autoimmune in your family beyond the diabetes?
Well, my brother actually got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 29, and that was about 13 years ago. And so that came out of nowhere. And it's funny how little you know about type 1 diabetes until it affects your life. Like he got it and I was like, oh man, that sucks. And over the years, I'd be like, how's your diabetes? And he's like, oh, fine. And I knew it had something to do like around food. I didn't even know there were 2 types of diabetes. And so when my son got diagnosed, I called up my brother and I'm like, do you have type 1 or type 2? He's like, type 1. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Like, this is what you've been doing? He's like, yeah. So I was like, oh my gosh, you don't know until you know.
Did his Christmas presents, did they get better from you? Or you're like, oh, I haven't been nice enough to him over the years.
Totally. I'm like, oh man, I have such respect for you, dude.
So, that's interesting. What's the age difference between you and your brother?
So I'm 46, he's 43. So I'm a little older.
But you're close in age. So are you close generally speaking?
I mean, we were growing up. Now it's like, how family life gets. It's like we talk on the phone, every few weeks and check in. And he recently moved to Idaho, so I don't even get to see him like as much as I did. We're not super close, but I mean, he's great, and we talk sometimes. And
but close enough that my inference, by the way, wasn't to pick your family apart, but it was to say, like, you guys were talking to each other, and it didn't occur to him to share what his type 1 was with you, and you didn't ask too many questions either. Is that fair?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was just like, he's got this, and I was concerned about him. I'm like, this seems like a thing. But yeah, we didn't talk too much, and we weren't seeing each other very much. And he would give him shots kind of like privately, when we would get together. And
so when your son was diagnosed, how soon until you went to your brother and said, hey, you got this kind of diabetes?
Oh, in the hospital. Oh. I'm like, bro, my son just got diagnosed. In the hospital, I'm like, do you have type 1 or type 2?
Well, obviously we can see that we can blame your parents for this. So that's good. It gets it off of you. You don't. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. But no other Hashimoto's, thyroid stuff, celiac, nothing like that?
On my mom's side, there's some thyroid stuff. I think my aunt might have Hashimoto's. So there's some thyroid stuff. And I've been checked for thyroid. I don't have any of that. The rest of our family did do the trial on that thing, and we don't have the antibodies.
Oh, that's good. That's good. It must have been comforting to know.
Yeah.
Okay. So you sent a very specific note, Jenny.
Yes.
So I don't want to beat around the bush. I want to dive right into the bush, if you don't mind.
So let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to tell people what you said, and then we'll just start talking. You said, I'd like to go over my sudden extreme anxiety over being the caretaker for my type 1 son. So even though you've been doing it for 7 years, you said his A1C is terrific. You're looping, so you have the backup of an algorithm. You now are just experiencing what you're calling almost debilitating anxiety around the management. So let's talk first about prior to when this happened. Did you ever have feelings like that leading up to this, or did they just come all at once?
I have had a hard time with diabetes since he was diagnosed. I mean, it is just a tough disease. And I never felt super comfortable. But in the first years, so when he was diagnosed, I was 8 months pregnant. And so like a month in, I've got a newborn and diabetes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And so like, I am just drowning trying to figure it out. And so the first few years were kind of a blur. I'm like doing the best we can here. And then I started looking around for a podcast and I found yours. And so I think I found yours in 2018. So we've been listening for 4 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you really turned things around for us. But to answer the question, yeah, like I've always felt like some uncertainty, like I'm like, this is hard. Ugh. And then about 6 months ago, my mom passed away, and she was 70, had COPD, and it was time for her to go. She wanted to go. It was bittersweet. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it was of course a big thing. And then after that, like all of these things, it's like all of these busy things started happening, and I felt like I couldn't process it. And then I started to feel this anxiety around diabetes that I hadn't felt before. And part of it was, I feel like the more we listen to you, I feel like the more we know. And it's like, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And so I was trying to get the pre-bolus right. I was trying to, get the bolus right. Mm-hmm. And I was just not doing a great job. I feel like I'm still not doing a great job. And
so is your first concern that you could be doing better and that you're not, or is it about safety? Where do you feel it, or does it feel like it's everything?
When I think about it, I don't think so much about safety. I know that we can get him, if he's high or low, I know we can get him back where we need to. It may take some time, but it's just like the constant effort of it. Like, we do so many interventions during the day. It's mm-hmm. like we are, I'm texting him at school and I'm like, give yourself a quarter, have a glucose tab, eat 2 Sour Patch Kids. Like it's like during this time, I'm feeling better now, by the way. Like I reached out to like a number of people and tried to get support and help, and I'm feeling way better. But it's still there. But my concern is, I feel like I could be doing better, and I don't know how. Like there are so many variables that it's so frustrating to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going high. Did I miss on the bolus? Is the pump having issues? Is he just running high today? Okay. How much should I give? I don't want to give too much. And so just the ongoing uncertainty of it was just wearing on me. I felt like it was like after 7 years, I was having this major burnout, major anxiety. And yeah, I was like almost having panic attacks, like right. At every meal. I'm like, is this going to be the right amount? And I would just stare at the number. And I'm like, I can't live like this.
Yeah. Jenny, let me ask you something. So in the note, you mentioned like a 5.4 A1C. And so is he having a lot of lows?
Yes. That's another thing I wanted to talk to you about.
What are we calling low and what are we calling high? So let's do that now before we start. Like when you said like, I don't want there to be a high at a meal. Like what number makes you say that?
Around like 140. Like we'll usually give him a quarter around 120, mm-hmm. Like just to, we're just trying to like surf it, And so, but like if he's like heading up to 140 and then 150 and then 160. So around there, I'm like, he's high and I've missed. Okay. And then low, he goes below 70 every day. Like, I mean, he hits like in the 50s almost every day. Okay. So he's like getting, we're getting a lot of lows. Like I'm correcting a lot of lows. And so.
But are you causing the lows by over correcting like higher numbers? I mean, because 140 after a meal, in my opinion, is like, there's nothing wrong with that. I understand you don't want to go 160, 70, 80. You don't want to get into that climb. But I mean, what would happen if you didn't throw a quarter in at a 140? Do you ever just watch it to see what would happen? Just a brief 20-second reminder. Go to touchedbytype1.org to get tickets for their Dancing for Diabetes annual event being held on November 5th at the Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts in Orlando, Florida. Touchedbytype1.org. And of course, the Freestyle Libre 3 is available right now at usmed.com/juicebox or by calling 888-721-1514. Check out US Med for your diabetes supplies.
Sometimes I will and it'll turn around. Other times, like, I just don't know what it's going to do. I'm like, sometimes it'll go like to 180 and I'm like, oh man, I should have corrected, but yeah, I think.
But more often than not, you're correcting and then you need to stop a low later.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like I am creating a lot of the lows.
Yeah. But you can't stop yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that about, Jenny? This is going to be fun. Thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate this very much. So so first of all, I take your point, and he's 10 now. And so was it easier when he was younger?
No.
Okay. So I didn't know if there was like a hormonal thing that was coming into play. Has his eating style changed greatly over the years?
No.
So Jenny, you've been fighting this fight for a long time. So the reason it hit you, I'm going to guess, keeping in mind that I have no psychological training whatsoever. I'm going to guess that you were doing the things you thought you should do. You're bumping and nudging too far, causing yourself a problem on the other side that you have to fix, that causes a problem on the other side that you have to fix. And then I think then your mom died, and then you just didn't have it in you anymore to hold it all inside, is kind of how it feels.
Yeah.
Well, that's worth talking about for sure. So let's start with this. So he's looping. Do you have Night Scout? Can you see what his loop is doing?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So in the course of a day, are you seeing basal being taken away a lot? Are you using auto bolus or not auto bolus?
We don't use auto bolus, no.
Okay. So is it taking basal away? Is it adding basal all the time?
That's a good question. I feel like it's just doing both, It's just doing both. It's like, oh wow, he hasn't had basal for many hours, and then all of a sudden I'm like seeing like, oh, it's adding a lot of basal. Yeah, so like it's both.
I didn't mean to talk over top of you. I'm sorry. In a perfect situation, it should not be taking your basal away constantly. So is it taking it away after meals, or is it taking it away even away from food?
It is taking it away. It seems like it takes it away after meals.
Okay. Well, that it kind of does, though. That's sort of how it works. So like you put in insulin for the meal, and it decides that this insulin that's been bolused is enough for the food and your management for a number of, whatever the time is. And so it takes the basal away and it manages off of the bolus, adding more if you start drifting up, taking away for longer if it looks like you're going to be low later. So that's fine if at the end you're stable and the basal's back on, but that's not happening. What's happening after meals is he starts going up, and then you put in more insulin, and then no matter how much basal it takes away, it can't stop a low later. Does that sound right?
Right.
Okay. All right. So I didn't know I was gonna have to think this much, Jenny. That's fine. We're gonna mix emotions with thinking today.
Nice.
All right. So, all right. When's the last time you opened the loop up and just ran it like a regular insulin pump to see how close your basal and your carb ratios and correction factors were?
It's been about a year. Like we opened it up for a month, and that was helpful. And then, but now I think we just rely on it so much, that I'm like,
you don't want to stop. Has he gained or lost weight or become more or less active in the last year?
I mean, he's going through a growth spurt. He's eating more. He's requiring more insulin. And so, I mean, there's definitely some changes going on.
Mm-hmm. The episode, there's a pro tip called Bump and Nudge 2. It was made exactly for people like you.
Okay.
Have you
It
heard
seems
it?
like, well, I listened to the bump and nudge one, and I'm wondering if I listened to the part two. I
If
feel like I did.
the part 2 tells you if you're doing this too much, you've done something wrong. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's a,
that's what I think. Yeah. And do you have time to like look at his graphs with me?
you want to do it right now?
I don't know. We could do it like after or
Oh no, I mean it's up to you, but like I mean I think for the for context of the conversation, if you want to do it now, it's fine.
yeah.
I can give you a number to text it to if you like.
Yeah. So I just go into Clarity and then share the code, right?
Oh, you want me to look at him live? No,
Oh, I mean,
but
just
I'm not a doctor. I can't use his code to look at his Clarity.
Oh, gotcha. How
Yeah.
would you see his stuff?
I mean, you could do screenshots and send them to me.
Oh, yeah. Like I kind of wanted you to look at like his past like week and stuff and see like, oh, what trends are you seeing? But
okay.
But
well,
yeah, if you can't do that, then don't worry about it.
I think the trends are. Oh, it's interesting. Like your I don't know what the word is. I'm going to say personality, but I don't mean personality. There's a better word there for it. You're clashing with this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jenny's like, yes, I am, jackass. That's exactly what I'm saying. Okay. Yeah. So there's something about how you think and what the task is. And
Yes. Oh my gosh. And my husband is so well suited for this. Like he's got like this data mind and he only takes care of Kai. Like maybe like, I mean, he does it a lot. He's up with him like every morning. He takes him on the weekends. I mean, both of my kids, and he's better at it than me. And he does it less than me. That's what's frustrating because my mind is not geared for this.
no, I think you're touching it too much.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense or not, but so it sounds like because a 140 after meals, it's nothing to panic about.
Okay.
So let's talk for a minute about what happens to you internally when you see his blood sugar go higher. You think you're killing him?
I don't. I think
No?
so. We've been listening to you, and we are like, okay, maybe he shouldn't be going this high, and so so my husband is more afraid of highs. He doesn't want to see highs as much, and I don't want to see lows. And so we kind of clash in that way sometimes, but I'm feeling like he's saying, "Hey, we need to get that number down." And so I'm feeling like, "Okay, we need to get this number down."
He's saying that at like 140?
Well, I mean, we've recently talked about it and he's like, Scott was saying like things can like, after a meal, 140 is not that big of a deal. And so that's kind of a switch for me because I thought like, if I'm seeing like an arrow up at 125, like I've missed and I'm giving a quarter. And that's kind of where we were at. And I think we realized, even hearing you say that now, it's like, oh,
So there's a lot about the line that's important in this. So the numbers are guidelines, but it's more about the line. Like 125 straight up that's somehow going to turn into 140 and then stabilize might just be an indication that you didn't pre-bolus long enough.
Right.
And so if it's going to jump up and then stabilize at a lowish number, 140, like a lower high number, then that's probably too soon to correct because it very possibly, because your pre-bolus time might be off a little bit, you're going to get a big push from the insulin very soon. And now you've laid some on top of it again that is causing a low later. So the timing is the problem for you. Maybe because
I think so. And that's one thing I don't understand because like, let's say he's 112 and I'll look at that and I'll be like, okay, about 11-minute waiting time, depending on what his number's doing. If he's coming down fast, it'll be less. If he's going up a bit, it'll be a little bit more. And so I feel like I have a good grasp on that. But then like when I actually execute it, I'm like, man, I messed that up somehow. How did I mess that up?
I wonder if the auto bolus branch of looping wouldn't be valuable for you, because then when he was going up, the algorithm would try to stop it, and it would take the pressure away from you about thinking about putting more insulin in. Because maybe you're just bolusing too much when you're doing that? I mean, you obviously
Maybe.
are if it's causing a low later.
Yeah, because we are dealing with a lot of lows. So I feel like, maybe we're just intervening too much.
Yeah, you're jumping the gun is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, because I do have a history of kind of under bolusing for meals. Like, I'd rather see him go a little bit high than go low. And,
Oh, Jenny, you're a paradox. This is wonderful.
and then my husband will be like, he's like, it's better to, give a few carbs, and I mean, I've heard you say that too. But the thing is, it's like, he just like drops out. Like, he just like, the number will just go lower than I want him to. And I hear you talk about Arden, and she's not having a lot of lows. Like, she's like rarely going under 70. Is that right?
Yeah, we don't see a lot of lows. That's for sure.
Oh my goodness. And then but you're talking about being bold with insulin, and you are bold. And so I'm like, how is he doing this?
Okay. Well, how I do it and how you do it might likely be two different things. But I mean, as we're picking through this, is it possible that you're under bolusing the meal, causing the spike by not bolusing it properly, and then putting in more insulin that's causing a low later? So if you just
I think so.
Yeah, right. So just put the insulin where it belongs in the initial bolus.
Yeah, but I don't know what the right amount is. You know what I mean?
Well, it's likely some amount of the correction that you're using, because if that quarter was in, all right, let me try to think of a way to say this without having visually looking at you. So if let's use more specific numbers, like how much insulin's in an average meal bolus for him?
Oh, let's say 4 units.
Okay. And then later you put in a quarter.
Yes.
Do you do a quarter, then another quarter, or is it usually just one time?
I mean, it depends. Like, if he's going up to like 130 or so, a quarter. If he goes up to 150, another quarter. If he goes up to 170, another quarter. Mm-hmm. So I have kind of like these benchmarks that I'll follow. Usually it's a quarter or a half more.
Okay. So then, in my opinion, based on this, and keeping in mind, Jenny, that nothing you hear on the Juicebox podcast should be considered advice, if you just put the 4 1/4 or 4 1/2 in initially, then that would maybe stop the spike, which would stop you from putting in insulin down the road from the meal, which is then gonna then make him low later. I don't think you're far off from this, by the way.
Me too. I feel like I'm in the ballpark, and I just want I want the ballpark to be smaller. Like
that's okay. So I listen. It could be a million things, right? Maybe the 4's enough, and you're not pre-bolusing long enough. How long are your pre-boluses?
They're dependent on his number. I would say about 10 minutes. Like,
dependent on his number. How? Like, so if he's I don't know, if he's 130, you'll pre-bolus for 10 minutes, but if he's 90, you will pre-bolus a shorter amount of time?
Yeah. Like, I had heard the rule of like, okay, if he's 130, you take the first 2 numbers, 13 minutes is a good ballpark. So, depending on what his number's doing. If it's going down too fast, I'll do less. If he's going up a bit, I'll do more. So, if he's 90, I would do 9-ish minutes,
So taking away the internet's theories about pre-bolusing. When he's 130, if you pre-bolus, then 13 minutes later before he eats, what's his blood sugar?
Well, I will watch that too, because I'm like, if 13 minutes in, if he's 150, I'm going to add some time. If he's, going down, then I'll start him right away.
Okay. Going down like he's 120 diagonal down, go ahead and eat?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, which insulin are you using?
Novolog.
Gotcha. Novolog. So not Fiasp or Lumjev. So you're putting in insulin, and do you ever use the pre-meal button on the loop instead of pre-bolusing, or to help pre-bolusing?
Oh, no. I mean, I know it's there, and so the pre-meal button, you push it, an hour before or a half hour before, and it'll kind of...
It changes your target, is what it does, right? So I think pre-meal targets 72. I think that's the low.
Okay.
I think I want to say that's the lowest target that Loop lets you have, but I mean, maybe that's something you can change in the programming, but I'm pretty sure it targets the 72. So
Are you guys still looping, or have you moved to Omnipod 5?
oh yeah, no, Arden has used Omnipod 5 for a number of months, and then we've gone back to looping.
Really?
Yeah. So
Okay.
she did not enjoy carrying the controller and wanted everything on her phone.
Gotcha.
That was her biggest concern. Omnipod 5 worked exactly the way I expected it to. It did exactly what I thought, and it took me a little while to learn it. It took me a little while to learn how to set it up and how to get it going right. But once it did exactly. I don't see a ton of difference in any of the algorithms. I guess I probably shouldn't say that, but they all go about it slightly different way. But you know, I think with every algorithm I've seen so far, there are times when you need to help it, and there are times when you need to leave it alone. And those things are, you know, they take time to learn which is which.
Yeah. And so with Loop, do you just follow the recommendations, or does she, you know, like, hey, I'm going to eat this many carbs. It's saying I should give this much insulin. Do you guys just like follow the recommendations, or are you like playing with it a little bit? Like, I think she needs more than that or less than that.
No, generally speaking, we follow the recommendation. It's based on our settings.
Right. Exactly. Your settings have to be right.
Yeah.
I feel like our settings might be off a little bit, and like we are always tinkering with it. Like I'll put in some carbs and I'm like, I don't think that's right. I'm like, I'm going to do more. And so, you know, then that probably screws things up on the back end. And so.
Yeah, no, I mean, if the settings aren't, because it causes you to think too much. Like if your settings are, like your insulin to carb ratio is way off, then you're going to be constantly, I don't know, like second guessing it, like it sounds like you're doing, before you even get to see if it works or not. So, I mean, your settings have to be right. Also, opening the loop for a month is, I don't think you need to do that. But I think you need to find out, is the basal rate I have holding him stable without making him low? I think that's an important thing to understand.
And I should start with that at night.
Yeah. Try it overnight because it's simpler. He's not probably in puberty yet, right? So you probably don't have a ton of like growth going on and things like that. So maybe you can get a couple of good nights where you can check that. And then you say, okay, well, my basal looks right. Good. Next step, how am I set up for my insulin to carb ratio here? Or you could even, you could let a blood sugar raise up to, I don't know, 150 and put in, after it stabilizes, put in like a half a unit or a unit, whatever you think is reasonable, to see how far it moves him, to give yourself a pretty good idea of what the insulin sensitivity is, right? Like 1 unit moves me this far.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Right. And then, okay, now you have that. Now your insulin sensitivity is a little closer. And then you look at carb ratio, and you start with things that don't have extra impacts. Like you wouldn't try it with French fries, for example, because it has fat in it. But a meal that you feel pretty comfortable understanding, right? As far as the carb count goes, and your understanding of what the coverage needs to be for the insulin. So say you find that meal, you look at it and you decide, look, I don't know how many carbs are in this, but I know for certain that 4 units covers this meal really well. It's not going to cause a spike if I use a certain, pre-bolus, and it's not going to make a low later. So, okay. So it's 4 units for it. Then you go back and count the carbs, and you say, I'm making up numbers, right? It's got 40 carbs in it. Okay. Well, then his insulin to carb ratio is 1 for 10. Because 4 units covered this 40 carbs, or whatever the math ends up being. It's 4 units for 50 carbs. Just do the math that way. And then, okay, now I'm pretty close on my insulin to carb ratio. Great. Now I have my basal, I have my insulin sensitivity, my insulin to carb ratio. Now we go back into the loop and try it out and see what happens. And if you see a lot of unbalance with the basal being off all the time, then okay, that might tell you the basal's too strong. If the basal's constantly overworking, it's adding and it's adding, maybe you had your basal too weak. You bolus a reasonable pre-bolus, you see a spike, it's fine, goes 130, 140, comes back and goes level. You're pretty much there. You might need a little more maybe pre-bolus time in that scenario. But then I think that's just how you work through it. It shouldn't take that long to go through those steps. Like you shouldn't need a month for those steps.
Okay.
A few days, a week. I think that's pretty much it, really. Like you should be able to get a pretty solid idea after that. But you have to let it run to see. Like you gotta let it work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
An example that we just had, had to make some adjustments to Arden's recently, because we got her to college and her insulin needs changed drastically, like significantly less.
Oh, wow.
And then we made all the switches to that and we're like, okay, got it. Perfect. Good. And then 4 days later, it started going in the other direction again. I couldn't begin to tell you why. It doesn't even seem to matter. And so we started to bring them back slowly, like just kind of crank them in the other direction of being stronger again. And finally, after a week or so, because Arden's not with me, if she was with me, I would have done it much more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But after a week or so, because I was doing it remotely, I was like, screw this. This isn't working. Put all your old settings back in. And we put all the old settings back in from before she left for college, before she had the experience where she was super low, and everything's working well again.
Oh, wow.
So a big swing, by the way, for her. It was a big swing in some of those numbers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's that's what is hard for me is the variability, because I'm like, yeah, we could figure all this out and then it could change. And I mean, that's just the game, you know. And I feel like I need to come to some understanding that, like, hey, this is diabetes and it's okay. I was talking to his doctor about my anxiety, and she's like, you know, a working pancreas is making adjustments every minute. You know, she's like, we're trying to be a pancreas and we can't. And, you know, give yourself some slack.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
It's like, I feel like I could get to the point, like in my mind, I'm thinking, hey, if I could just get to the point, you know, he's just going to be cruising between 80 and 120. It's like, if I just do the right things. And I'm like, I don't think that's realistic. You know, like there's going to be ups and downs every day.
Sure.
Right.
No,
I mean,
100%.
I don't know though, but I don't know though. It seems like Arden's like cruising between 80 and 120 most of the time. Is that right? Or,
I mean, Arden's a girl and she's got hormones and she's a lady. So it's not apples to apples.
right.
I would tell you that our biggest struggles with Arden are meals that probably have more fat in them that cause highs later. So fighting through them when I'm not with her, even over these just first 3 weeks, have taken more time. When I'm with her, we were close. We were more like, hey, just crush this right here. But she's on her own and she's still figuring out how to handle that. Like, you know, and I also think she's still getting into college. So I think what's happening is she's having these meals later at night than she's accustomed to eating.
Yeah.
Then she's staying up later doing homework, and her blood sugar is persisting at a higher number, and she's not being as aggressive with it as she needs to be. And so it's lasting longer. I'd say those are her bigger struggles right now at college. It wouldn't have been the same 5 weeks ago when she was at home. Like her bigger struggles back then were more around, I mean, if I beat pre-bolusing, remembering to pre-bolus was her bigger struggle now, but something about the pattern she's living in right now, she's doing a good job of pre-bolusing. She's also using the pre-meal button, which was something I could never get her to do before at home, but now she's seeing the value in that she's at school.
Nice.
So I think it's constantly, I mean, your son's at an age where not a lot's going to change about his life over the next couple of years, but for Arden, it's constantly morphing. Like, where are the struggles at?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the settings have to be right. I'm going to tell you right now, if the settings are wrong, the algorithm is useless. And then you're just fighting something that's not knowable. And from listening to you talk now for a half an hour, you want this all to make sense and do what it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if your settings are wrong, that doesn't exist. And now you're trying to figure out something that you don't have the right input for. So how do you know what's happening next? Because you're expecting it to do one thing, But that expectation is built on the settings being correct.
Right.
That makes
right.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did want to talk a little bit more about the fat and protein rises. That's something that's kind of newer to us. Like in the last year, we've been listening to some of your episodes about it. And like, we're, seeing like, wow, this is a reality. And that is hard for me because so I keep like a pretty detailed log about like what works for what meal. We have about 10 meals that we mostly do, what usually works. Oh man, there's so much variability. Sometimes 3 units work, sometimes 5 units work. But after the fact, like the fat and protein rise, like I do not know what to do. Sometimes like we'll do like this chicken tender and smoothie meal. And I've done it so many times. And it's amazing that I can still mess it up. Like I still mess it up. And so, after the fact, it's, what does this fat and protein rise require? Well, it's sometimes a half unit, sometimes it's 2 units. And for me to give a unit blindly, like 2 hours later, it's like, I know this is coming, just give a unit. And I'm like, oh man, it's so hard for me. And so I start to chase it. I'm like, okay, he's going up. Let's give a quarter. He's going up again. Let's give a quarter. And with a fat and protein rise, like my normal way of bolusing, like for correcting, that doesn't work. Like he'll be up to 200 in no time. And then, takes hours. So the fat and protein rises are hard. I haven't found a great way to deal with them.
Well, it's funny. You present your problem and answer your problem while you're talking. And then at the end you say, I don't know what to do. Like,
yeah.
You just told me what to do, but you're not going to do it. You can't chase the blood sugar, and you have to trust that what you know is going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so in the times that I have done it, like it's worked, and I'm like,
Jenny,
that worked. And, but get this, there are times I've done it and it's bit me in the ass and it didn't work.
Of course, but isn't it easier to stop the low or the fall when it isn't needed than it is to fight with a high?
It is, but the thing that I hate is like waking him up in the night, like for a juice. And I'm like, it's like I can like give insulin all night long and like not wake him up. But I mean, it's harder on me and, and then he's high and that's not good either. But yeah, the lows are easier than the highs because a sticky high, so hard. And then you're giving insulin at night, which isn't ideal, like too much insulin at night. I'm like, oh.
Jennifer, can we talk like friends for a minute?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have issues with perfection in other parts of your life?
No, I'm like so relaxed. I'm
really?
like, so my husband is the perfectionist and I am the relaxed one.
Okay.
And it's like, we're having this like switch of things.
Is it a switch of things or are you, and I don't mean to dig into your relationship too far, or are you trying to accomplish something the way you think he would do it so that he's happy about it?
Yes.
I am very good at this, Jenny. Okay.
So, I know.
So you can't do that. Because you're fighting your own nature. You're fighting what you think is right by trying to apply what you believe he would do, except your brain doesn't think through things the way his does. So you keep messing it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just do you.
Just do me.
Yeah. The world's just t-shirt slogans. I don't know how to break this to everybody, but just follow like your 20 favorite t-shirt slogans and you'll be okay. So, just like seriously, you have to trust your own gut. You can't wonder what his gut's saying because all the decisions that you've made up until this moment are based on how you would handle this. And then you get to a number that you think your husband's going to be dissatisfied with. And then you suddenly try to shift to what he would do, but you don't actually know what he would do. And it wouldn't matter anyway, because the first 10 steps were yours.
Yeah.
Oh, Jenny. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, because if you're not a perfectionist in the rest of life, then but you want this to be perfect. You want this diabetes thing to be absolutely perfect. I think the best thing you might do for yourself is to come to grips with the idea that you're not going to get everything you want here. Like you might get a lot of it, but you have to get, there's got to be give and take somewhere. Like you either don't want a 140 blood sugar after a meal, or it's okay. And because what happens next? Like, I look at the 140, stays 140 for a little while before he comes back down. I have to think that's okay, because if I don't, I'm correcting too late. I'm chasing the blood sugar, forcing it to be low, and then I'm on this roller coaster that's making me crazy. So you want everything to work, but I'm trying to think this through. You want everything to work, but you're creating problems every 90 minutes for yourself.
Yeah, like keeping him stable for like a period of time is hard. Like it's not happening very much, you know?
You're a drunk swerving on the road. You're just going back and forth and back and forth. You just be comfortable riding on the line on the right, and just be like, okay, I'm not in the lane, but at least I'm not swerving. Because I think you would learn a lot about the management by. Oh, I almost cursed. I was gonna say by just leaving it the fuck alone for a little while, and letting it be. You know what I mean? Like, yes, you're bumping and nudging too much.
Yes, so I think that's a good idea. Maybe just like let things chill for a little bit, get kind of a feel like for what it is going to do, and
yes, that's brilliant, 100%. Yeah, because earlier, good.
And if he's getting like a little bit high while I'm figuring this out, it's okay. You know,
right?
It's like, let's just see this.
Oh, please. I sent Arden off to college in a place where she's sleeping by herself. I looked at 170 overnight blood sugars for a week, like making sure we were doing the right thing, because I was like, I can't just yak this in the wrong direction and create a low while she's by herself. So let me bring it down more slowly. I wasn't thrilled about it. It's not going to ruin her life. You said something earlier that I want you to know would be a huge waste of time. You were like, I want you to go look at all of our records and try to find trends. But think about that. If you're doing 4 or 5 things that you shouldn't be doing, why am I looking for trends in it?
Yeah. Right? Well, that's what I think about looking at the data. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. You know, like,
well, also it's because like you're playing tennis, right? But you show up with a baseball bat and you're wearing cleats on the court, and then you want me to look at the video and find out why your tennis is bad. Your tennis is bad because you're using a bat and wearing cleats. Stop doing that. You know what I mean? So I think that's why, in my opinion, with this stuff, it's always about going back to the beginning and just sort of starting over again. But you're not really starting over, because you have a lot of guidelines and you know where you're close. So I don't know. For me, it's get your basal right. Make sure your insulin sensitivity is good. Make sure your carb ratio is pretty accurate. Pre-bolus an amount of time that, it gets you as low as possible before the meal without creating a low that needs intervention. And then just letting the bolus work and see what happens. And if you eat something with a bunch of fat or protein in it, you got to do some experimenting, see where it hits. Is it 90 minutes after we start eating? Do I see the rise from the French fries? And if so, I got to pre-bolus that rise a little bit. And if it doesn't happen one time, then I catch it with some fast acting on the other side. But I'd rather be, I'd rather stop a lower falling blood sugar than fight with a high one. This podcast is all set up for you, but you're listening to the wrong parts of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is very interesting. Are you having a good time, or is this not going the way you hoped?
No, I'm having a great time. It's great to talk to you. Like, we've been listening to you so much, and I'm like, wow, I'm talking to Scott. So this is cool. Well, thank you.
No, please, it's my pleasure. And it's weird that you feel like that. So it's nothing. I could be completely. There are probably people listening right now that are like, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and I might not. But all I know is that settings are very, very important. Then timing is very important. And then understanding the impacts of different foods is the rest of it.
Yeah. Then that's where I have a hard time too, because I really do rely on carb ratios a lot. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And so, I've been trying to be more aware of that. Like, how does this food hit him? How does this food hit him? And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. My question was about, you said when your husband's managing him, it goes better.
Yeah.
But it's the same algorithm and the same settings and the same kid. So what's he doing differently than you're doing? Is he just putting in the right amount of insulin for the meal and not undervaluing the meal?
Yeah.
Jenny, you don't even have any questions for me. You just wanted to come on and tell me what's going wrong so I could tell you what to do.
Yes, I did. This was an excuse to talk to you. I'm like,
Oh, that's so funny. So the anxiety hit you earlier when you wrote to me, but I can't get people on fast enough. So it's kind of gone away. So tell me what you did that's helped lessen it.
So, I was in a crisis mode and I just started reaching out. I was like, okay, I reached out to you. I'm like, I want to talk to the Kung Fu diabetes master and like, get some input from him. I reached out to some moms. I met a mom recently who, she's got like a 9-year-old who was diagnosed when he was 2. They're looping. They listen to Juicebox. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I want to spend some more time with this family. I just want I just wanted to spend some time with people who understood, because it's like, I want the world to understand what we do and they don't, you know what I mean? That's unrealistic for me to want that. I reached out to a therapist. I actually got on some medication because it was I just was not doing well.
Okay.
Talked to his doctor, listened to a book about anxiety. And I mean, it's like I wasn't doing well personally and I knew I needed to be. Oh. And so I was like, I need to take care of myself and I need to put some less pressure on myself about this because, it's like he's better, even though I feel like I'm not doing a great job, it's like, it's better that I'm doing it than not doing it. You know what I mean? It's like, I want him to be a happy and healthy kid and I'll bolus for lunch. And, I'm just so happy to see him like eating what he wants, and it's like, hey, I might screw this up, but at least I'm here, Jenny, doing it.
Yeah. It just occurred to me while you were talking that you're not overreacting because you don't know what to do. You're overreacting because of the anxiety. Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay. I'm sorry it took me that long to think that way. Oh, all right. So your husband doesn't feel anxious about it. So he's you're like, yeah. And like you spread this anxiety around a little bit, give everybody a little bit. So you do know the right thing to do. You can't stop yourself because, so is the answer not to look? What's the answer?
Oh, what do you mean?
Could you just like bolus for a meal and throw your phone across the room?
Well, yes, I've been experimenting with that because I'm like, I don't need to be staring at this number. And so like, I will set like the alerts at like 80 and 120.
Yeah.
And be like, let's just chill out and like, see what's going to happen. And that's helpful. Yeah. That's helpful, actually.
Oh,
what I mean? I think that's some of that.
Sure. Yeah. No, 1,000,000%. This is not as much about, this isn't as much about this, about the diabetes as it is about you're reacting to it too soon, but you can't stop yourself from reacting too soon. So the medication helped. Did it kind of cut the anxiety down a little bit?
Yeah. Like I feel kind of like I did beforehand. And so I'm hoping it's like a short-term fix, like, be on it for a year, get myself in a better way and then get off perhaps,
Right.
But yeah, it has helped.
Jenny, I can't help but to go back to your mom's passing and say that maybe that this is like subconsciously like you trying to make sure nobody else is sick or dies. Like
wow. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. And like, she was a super anxious person. And I'm like, did some of her anxiety like come to me like after she died?
Maybe she was holding it all for you and gave it to you at the end.
I'm like, this is not cool. No, but and then like some existential stuff came up. It's like, oh, I don't have parents anymore. And like, oh, I feel like I'm an orphan of the universe. And like, you know what I mean? I mean, it was like big stuff happens when your parents die, know?
Yeah, now you're really an adult. Right?
Now I'm really an adult. Yeah. And it's like, and I'm taking care of this kiddo that needs a lot of support. And gosh, I'm just, with this anxiety, it's like I felt me wanting to make my world smaller with him. I'm like, oh, you want to go out to McDonald's? And like, sometimes it's like, I just don't have the mental bandwidth to do that. I'm like, I'm like, some days I'm feeling better, some days I'm not. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I've been wanting to take him out for an ice cream. And I'm like, I need to be mentally ready for this. And we need to be having a good diabetes day,
Oh wow. Yeah, no,
and,
I didn't think about all those different kind of extraneous variables that are coming at you because of that. So, okay. So obviously you can't just give anxiety away, and you can't, calmness can't be given from person to person. Like your husband can't just say, leave it alone. But would it be helpful if the two of you did it together and you just deferred to him to teach yourself that if you didn't react, it would be okay? It's the only thing I can think of.
yeah, like I love the days that we do it together, because
Mhm.
it's like there really is like a back and forth and a give and take. And like, I'm thinking this is going to work. I'm thinking this is going to work. And yeah, like I feel like better and like smarter, like when I'm with him,
And you can trust him, like trust's the wrong word, but you can take his lead and not let the anxiety overwhelm what he's saying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, sometimes so it's funny because he's more bold than I am. And so like sometimes he'll be like, let's give insulin on this. And I'm all, no, like my body's like, no. I hate lows for some reason. Like
Sure.
I just don't like lows because he goes low so often. And sometimes it takes 5 grams. And like, I mean, we've dealt with lows where it's like 20, 25 grams. And I'm like, I don't like that. That's more than a juice box,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I'm definitely more comfortable at a high. Like if he's hanging out at 120, I'm like,
Jenny,
this is fine.
yeah,
Let's
Jenny,
just
I
like
have to
leave
tell
it.
you, calling 120 high, I think is part of your problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think considering 120 high is definitely part of your problem.
Like, well, would you let like Arden just like hang out for 6 hours at 120? Like,
No,
is that high?
no,
Right? Like,
I wouldn't do that, but I wouldn't cause a low either.
right.
Like I
Right.
know how to like bring it down a little bit without making a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've got Loop working with me too. It's like, I got to think of that.
Does
It's like, if I'm giving a quarter, it's like Loop's already given
Loop's
some.
doing its thing. That is part of the reason why I wondered out loud if the auto bolus wouldn't be better for you, because it would be more immediate.
And so I'm not totally familiar what the auto bolus branch is or does. And so, I mean, I think my husband does, and we can go into that, but
Yeah, it basically, instead of trying to push the 120 with basal increases,
mhm.
it'll push it with boluses. So it'll do, I think it comes preset at 60%, meaning that if it looks at a number and says, I think you need a unit to move you back to target, it will give 60% of that number.
Oh, interesting.
And
And
then,
that makes me nervous because I'm like, wow, we're experiencing so many lows right now. Would that just like
yeah, I think
aggravate it?
I
But
think
but I
you're
wouldn't be
making
giving the,
I think you're making the lows though, Jenny.
yeah.
Yeah. So so again, then it would take another reading, and then it would look at its predictive model and say, okay, well, if I think it needs more, like say it gave you zero 0.6 of the 1 unit it expected, right? So now there's 0.4 it hasn't given yet. If it decides you need more at the next reading, it'll only give you 60% of the 0.4.
Oh, okay.
Right. And then so it kind of titrates it that way.
Okay.
Because maybe what's happening is you're staring at the 120 and it's pushing basal, which is going to take an hour or two for it to move you back to where you want to be. And so now it's given him enough basal to make him stable later. And then you come in and make another unnecessary bolus. And then it probably then takes away basal trying to stop the fall and can't.
Right.
And that's,
Right.
yeah, that's what's
It's just a cluster.
Well, Jenny, so I'm terribly sorry because anxiety is not something I understand personally, like from a personal experience, but I have spoken to enough people that I do get how it impacts people.
Yeah.
And you had none of this prior, or you had some of it, but it's worse?
I had some of it, but it's like it just came on like 10 times worse. Like, I'm like, I have not experienced this. Like I would rate my anxiety every day. I'm like, how am I feeling today? I'm like, man, my anxiety is an 8 today. And that was happening a lot. Now my anxiety is like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4. I do get nervous around bolus time still. Like, it's like, I'm going to be bolusing for lunch soon. And it's just like, it just makes me nervous.
It ramps you
and,
up.
It's like, I just don't want to miss the mark. I just want to like have it like just be the right amount. And it's
because if you don't, then that's another anxiety inducing moment.
Totally. And part of it feels like, man, I've been doing this for 7 years. It's like, shouldn't I be better at this?
Which makes you feel anxious that you're never going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. No, you're caught in it's a death spiral.
So I think like if I can just like keep listening to the podcast, and it does help me to hear like the stories and hear people talk about it, I don't feel so alone. Mm-hmm. And like, I love like the really specific things like, hey, here's how you bolus for fat and protein. And, here's some really practical tips. It's like, it's so helpful. And talking to other moms and, and just like relaxing a little around it, because it's like, yeah, he's got a disease and it's diabetes and there's going to be ups and downs. And it's like, his blood sugar is not going to be chilling at 90 like all the time. And that is okay.
I think that's what I wanted to say to you earlier that I never ended up saying, which is, it sucks, but he does have diabetes. So,
right.
So your goal changes significantly. Plus, before diabetes, you were never aware of what his blood sugar was.
Yeah.
You had no idea. And you never thought about it. So it wasn't something to be concerned with. You never thought about what he ate or didn't eat or how long it was before, etc. Like none of this existed in your life. And now suddenly it's all here, and you kept your expectations where they were, but the game changed a little bit. So,
yeah, totally. And I think like when he was diagnosed, I thought, because they were like, he can eat anything he wants. You just have to dose for it. They did say, stay away from stay away from syrup and pop. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. But it's like, he can have anything he wants and he can do anything he wants. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah. And then like, as time goes on and as I'm learning more, I'm like, I mean, he can eat what he wants, but it's like, there's repercussions. You know what I mean? It's like, we can't have pizza at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, we could, but do I want to deal with that? We can do anything, but it's like, how much mental effort is it going to take to manage diabetes when we're doing it?
Yeah, because its impact on you is different than its impact on me and other people. So when you think about pizza at 10 o'clock, as an example, you get anxious right away. You start to cry. Like just talking about it. Like, are you upset because you're letting him down? You think that he can't eat pizza? Are you upset thinking about, oh, I'm going to be up all night with this? Like, what part jumps into your head first?
Well, part of it is like, so like, I don't know. I love food, and to me, food equals love. You know what I mean? It's like, I want to give you what you want. And so I'm sad about that. I'm like, he'll text me that, hey, we're having a snack at school. And I'm like, I don't know how to bolus for that right now. So like, I don't say that, but you know what I mean? Hey, save it for after school or save it for lunch. So there's like this emotional part of it.
Yeah, like you feel like you're not giving him something that he deserves.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. So there's that emotional part, and then part of it is like, oh man, I'm going to be dealing with the repercussions of this later. So I was brave the other week, and I'm like, he wanted pizza, and I'm like, let's order pizza. We never order pizza at night, and I had an idea of what was going to happen, and like the meal went well, and then like I just wasn't aggressive enough at night, and it bit me in the butt. And I'm like, okay, we can. I don't know. Sometimes I just want to stay away from that kind of stuff, and sometimes I want to do it again so I can learn. Because the more we do it, the more I learn how to do it. You know.
No, I understand. I really do. I wish there's this moment here where I wish you could feel like the way someone feels who doesn't have anxiety, who would still be upset by this, but not driven to the place where you are. Like, I have felt the way you felt. I have felt like, oh my God, please, no one, like, who just ordered Chinese food? Like,
seriously, Honestly.
Which one of you motherfuckers said we should get Chinese food? I'll kill you all. You know what I mean? Like, and then, but I can let that go. And as I was younger, I would have just attributed that to like, I'm a guy, and maybe there's some of that's true, but I don't feel anxious the way you do. So like, even though I know, oh God, it's Chinese, I'm going to have to figure this out. It might not go right. It might cause a problem later. I'm able to blissfully ignore even what's 2 hours in front of me. Maybe it is because I'm a boy. I'm just like, it'll probably be fine. And if it's really, that is the biggest difference between men and women, isn't it? Like, guys are just like, it'll likely work out. And if it doesn't, we'll just hit something or kill something, whatever we got to do. And women are like, I need this to go right. And you have all that mom guilt on top of it, by the way. Which like I'm tired to boot. Like, even though we're looping, it's like I'm still up a lot in the night, and like we're one of those people. And I'm getting the impression that Dexcom, it's awesome. I think it works great on some people, and I think it doesn't work as well on some people. And like I think he's one of them where it doesn't work great, especially at night, because I'll get a lot of false lows. And like if I get a low alert at night, which is often, and I test him, he's not really low. So is that a compression low?
It's a compression low. And it's also, I don't know. Have you run into this? Have you seen this where it's like Dexcom just doesn't like work as well on some people? Like we get a lot of ups and downs. We get a lot of false readings. We get a lot of sensor errors. It's rare that his Dexcom will last the full 10 days. And even when we were on the previous Dexcom, like it lasted 7 days, I think. Right. It was rare that it would last 7 days. Like it's just.
So I don't know if that's some sort of user error or if it's a body chemistry thing. Like I don't know.
I think it's a body chemistry thing, because I had like a Dex person even come out to the house at one point, and I'm like, okay, this is how I'm putting it on. What do you think? And he's like, you're doing it right. And I'm like,
what about hydration? Is he really properly hydrated?
Well, that's one thing that has come up, and I try to have him drink, as much as I can, and he's probably not as hydrated as he could be. So that's always something I'm thinking about.
I mean, if you could push like real serious hydrate, like not like don't float his kidneys away or anything like that, but like keep him really hydrated for a week, and see if that helps, because that really could be it. Because it's reading interstitial fluid, right? It's not reading your blood. And if you're dehydrated, that fluid's not flowing properly, and you're getting, it's almost like it's like a compression low, in that, you're not getting a proper reading because the glucose isn't being distributed evenly in that fluid. Yeah. So you can't, you're not seeing that. I think if you're putting it on correctly, etc., I think making a real concerted effort around hydration would give you an answer as to whether or not that's your issue or not. May give you something to focus, and it might give you something to focus on too, Jenny.
Right.
Just don't that poor kid. I already see his eyes filling up with water. Just wait. You're like, keep drinking. So, but I think you're smart to. I know we're up on an hour already, but I think you're smart to. I mean, after listening to you completely, I think working on yourself and trying to minimize your anxiety is probably like step 1A, 1B in this. Like you can go back and look at his settings, but I might just try like tying my hands behind my back for a couple of days first.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just let it go. Cause it sounds like when your husband does it, it works. So that would indicate to me that the settings are right. I don't think it's that he knows something you don't know. I think it's almost that he's not touching it as much as you are. Like, how some pots need to be stirred and some recipes tell you like, leave it alone. I think you're stirring the thing that's supposed to be simmering. That's all.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And how many interventions are you doing with Arden a day? Like, is it like you're not, or, when she was with you?
Like, how many times do I talk to her?
Yeah.
Yeah, hardly ever. So
really, yeah. Well, I've heard you say you think about diabetes 10 minutes a day, and I'm like, that is amazing. Like there are 10 minutes I'm not thinking about it, and so it's like,
I'm also not trying to keep her blood sugar at 95 constantly. So
you're letting it ride, and like you're seeing like ups and downs, but it's, it's in a good way, and you're letting it ride.
Yeah. Here's an example. She goes to class this morning and she's at the end of a site. It's the pump's got like 30 units left in it, so we're pretty much on the end of like 72 hours coming up on it. And I don't know what happens. She doesn't eat in the morning. I don't see a bolus on Night Scout anywhere. So she heads out the door, goes to school. She's in her room, and then she starts experiencing a rise. And I let it bolus it. It does the microboluses, and it was having trouble getting ahead of it. And I think I can look and tell you, because I think maybe you knowing this would be really helpful for you. So here, let me turn it sideways so I can look at it a little better. So she's doing like all morning between like at 7:30 to 10, she's between like 107 and 120. But the way I think of that is that she's out of bed. She's in college. She has not thought about having diabetes once for 2 hours. Would it be cool if she was 10 points lower? It would be. And I might make an adjustment to get that. But like I said, we're still dialing in college. So right around 10 o'clock, the 107 turns into 112, that turns into 117, that all of a sudden hits 124. And and now this thing's microbolusing already. But it took it from 10 a.m. until 10:56 to put a stop to the rise. And in that time, she went from that 120 to 185. And then over the next hour, it brought her back again. And so by noon, she's 95. And I think that doing this for so long and watching Arden grow from a person who was 10 years old, who was with me constantly, and I was able to be very, very like hands-on. I don't think this is terrible. This wasn't food. This was probably adrenaline or anxiety or something. She's in class. She's trying to learn something new. And what this graph says to me is that from 8 a.m., I'm looking at a 6-hour graph right now, from 8 a.m. until 12:51 p.m., I don't see that Arden ever thought about diabetes. And her blood sugar spiked to 180 for 30 minutes, and the other 30 minutes was the rise, and the other 30 minutes was the fall. So over 2 hours, there was a rise, a spike, and a fall. And she still hadn't thought about it. The algorithm took care of everything. The first time Arden thought about diabetes was around, I'm guessing by what I'm looking at, I'm going to guess she ate about an hour ago. Or let me see. Yeah, it looks like she had a snack somewhere. It's the first time she's probably thought about her insulin in 7 hours. And I just think that that's as important as her blood sugar.
Absolutely. And so like, is she getting a high alert? And like, so you're letting Loop do its thing with auto boluses, and like, she's not getting an alert at like 150 or whatever. And she knows that, hey, I need to give myself a quarter.
You're delightful. She gets the alert. She probably mutes her phone because she's in school and she doesn't want to do it.
Right. Okay, so if something was going to go
completely tits up, then I would intervene and be like, "Hey, you got to look at this thing," and then that's it. But instead, all I've done is I sent her a text today saying, "Hey, at the end of an infusion site, sometimes the algorithm might need your help." Meaning that this thing's bolusing its little ass off and it can't stop you till 186. It's probably because the site's a little older. And it's only bolusing 60% of the time. So that was my way of saying to her, if you would have intervened here and just put in the extra insulin even that it wanted, that it can't do because it's listed because it's limited at 60%, that would probably be a good idea. But I didn't say it to her so that she would do it. I said it to her so she would learn it.
Yeah. And so if you were with her, would you have given her a bolus?
Yeah. 100%.
You would have. Okay.
Yeah, right. But I'm an adult and I'm paying attention and I'm not going to college and etc. But the fact that it didn't happen is not causing me any agita.
Yeah.
That's where you're getting stuck, is that everything that's not,
and I love that you're thinking about it like, hey, she's in school. It's like, this is as important that she doesn't need to be bothered with this. Loop is taking care of this.
There's other variables at play. Yeah. My definition of perfect changes because her situation has changed.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's all. You are fighting against anxiety, and I run the risk of sounding sexist here, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Sometimes ladies want everything.
Yeah.
You ever notice that? Like there's no ability to go, all right, I've got 10 things I need. If I get 8 of them, good day. It's like I say to my wife sometimes, you're still mad at me for the first thing I ever did wrong 30 years ago. Maybe it's time to let that go. So there's some things you just have to, with diabetes, you just have to be like, you have to find the balance between not letting everything get terrible and not overthinking every little thing that might not matter in the long run. Like, and take some comfort from this. And Jenny, I have to go in a second, but I'm not saying that poor health is okay.
Right.
But there are plenty of people who come on this podcast and say, look, I grew up through regular and MPH, and I'm 55 years old, and I don't have any ill effects from diabetes.
Yes.
And those people,
it's like,
they weren't living like your son.
Yeah, what we have now is amazing, and like we're doing a great job. And it's like, having a little variability. Wow. I think, just relaxing a bit is going to help me. Yep. So
if you and I were friends and I didn't know any of your details, I'd be like, Jenny, you got to calm the fuck down.
Yes, I need to calm the fuck down, dude.
Yeah. That's pretty much what I would think. And I would adjust my ideas of what perfect looks like.
Okay.
And probably try to look over your husband's shoulder and see what he's doing, and more probably specifically what he's not doing.
Yeah.
That's it. This is what I have figured out in an hour and 14 minutes.
You're amazing. You're amazing. Thank you so much. And
Please.
We just love and appreciate you so much. So thank you.
I can't thank you enough for having this conversation, because this is really important. A lot of people feel the way you feel, and not a lot of people are as honest about it when they come on. So this was well done by you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
First, I'd like to thank Jenny for coming on the show today and being so honest and talking through her issues. And I'd like to thank US Med and remind you that you can get the Freestyle Libre 3 right now at usmed.com/juicebox or call 888-721-1514. Looking for a great night out? The 22nd annual Dancing for Diabetes Showcase will take place on Saturday, November 5th at 7 p.m. at the Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts in Orlando, Florida. Touchedbytype1.org to get tickets. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.